Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Adweek webinar, where we'll be discussing social media trends for 2023 and ways that you can start to align your strategy, and not just your social strategy, but your strategy overall with disruptive consumers. And our webinar today is based on a great report that has just been put out by our sponsors at Talkwalker and Khoros. I'm Stuart File, Vice President of Branded Content at Adweek, and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to take a few moments here and make sure that everyone knows what to expect from our webinar today, and also that everyone is familiar with the various features of our webinar platform. Our presentation today should go somewhere in the 30-minute range. Afterwards, we are going to have plenty of time for audience questions. We have a large audience, and I'm sure a large audience with lots of questions today. So if you have a question at any point during the presentation for our speakers, just use the question tool that you see on your screen, probably right underneath where you're seeing me in your window. And we are going to get to as many audience questions as we can following our live presentation. It's not too late to invite your colleagues to come and join us today. We'd love it if they would. To make it easy for you, we sent everyone who's registered a final reminder email about 15 minutes ago. In that email, you're going to find a link to the registration page, so grab that link. Send it off to your colleagues, Slack it to them, email it to them, whatever they need. They can register, come on in and join us live. They still have lots of time to do that. Good news, if they can't make it live, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be available on demand, and we're going to send everyone a link to the on-demand recording later this afternoon, about 3:30, 4 o'clock. So check your email then. You can always come back if you have to leave today's webinar early. You can always come and listen to the on-demand video recording, watch the on-demand video recording at your leisure. As I said, we're talking about trends today. There's going to be, as you can see, some slides. We've got a PDF of the slides available to you if you want to grab those as a takeaway from today's webinar, and you're going to find them right now in the event resources area. You should see that right by where you see the question tool on your screen. Lastly, I just want to invite everyone to please check out the Adweek webinar calendar, www.adweek.com/webinars with an S. We've got webinars coming up throughout the month of November, a little break for Thanksgiving, and then we're picking up again in December and should go really up through the holidays. Whole bunch of different topics. I know next week we've got a great one coming up on field marketing and measuring the impact with digital tools for live experiential. We have other social topics coming up, obviously things on cookies and targeting and everything like that. So see what's coming up, sign up for an upcoming webinar. You'll also get access to our entire archive of on-demand webinars as well. All right, so let's move on to today's webinar. And let me just take a brief moment here and introduce our speakers to you. From our sponsors at Talkwalker, we're joined by David Lowe, the global CMO of the company, where he oversees, as you could probably imagine, worldwide marketing for that consumer intelligence platform. He's led various companies from startups to Fortune 500s, delivering high-performance integrated marketing strategies that have propelled next-level growth. From Khoros, we're very happy to be joined by Natanya Anderson, GM of Strategic Services, where she and her team collaborate with global brands to support broad customer experience strategies with expert services to drive deep customer engagement and ROI. And she joined Khoros after being director of marketing at 365, the Whole Foods, with part of Whole Foods Market. And when she was there, she was actually a webinar guest of ours. So we're always happy to have her back now. And then we are also very happy to be joined by Dan Rakolas. Dan is the lead for social listening and intelligence over at Kraft Heinz. leading a team responsible for delivering consumer intelligence across the entire Kraft Heinz North America zone. He's been with that company for some time. And again, Dan, it's going to be great to have some of those great insights as we hear about some of this stuff. Again, some real world examples. So I think you've all heard enough from me. So let me bring our panelists up to begin our webinar. David, Natanya, and Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Stuart. I really appreciate it, Stuart. First of all, your support making this happen today and the relationship we have with Adweek, and most importantly, your incredible audience. What a turnout. Dan was telling us yesterday that I think he had the largest registration for any webinar this year for this webinar. So welcome, everybody. Thanks so much. I also want to quickly thank, I know Dan just introduced everybody, but I really want to thank our new partners at Khoros, leaders in social media management and customer engagement. They've been just phenomenal in terms of helping us both with the report that we're going to talk about today, and we now have actually alignment in terms of our capabilities. And lastly, and it certainly requires no introduction, but a world-class brand like Kraft, to have them part of this is pretty phenomenal. So thank you all so much. Why don't we just jump into things? It's almost 10 after. I think we have a pretty good turnout here. And let's talk about why we're here. So this is our 8th annual social media trends report. And the report highlights the top 10 social media trends that will be impacting brands in the coming year. You know, over the past 2 years, right, how many times have we heard this? There's been a lot of change. We're not here to talk about all that change. I'm sure you're feeling thankful about that. What we're here to talk about is the impact of that change and how it's going to affect brands and marketers in the coming year. And really what we've seen just at a very high level is that consumers just more demanding, right? They're more urgent, and brands need to move a lot quicker, which has really proven to be difficult. And so what we did this year is, in the past, we've just done insights around what the trends are going to be. But what we found is that you can't just be armed. Brands can't just be armed with insights. It's now about having the ability to quickly turn those insights into actions, right? So planning has, I think, become a lot more difficult than in the past. And so we did the report differently this year. First of all, we started with using our platform, TalkWalker, right? It's for social listening, deep listening, and we used our AI to evaluate billions of data points and conversations globally and specifically within the US. We combined that with insights from influencers. And that's a huge part of what makes this report so successful and provides validity and value. This isn't just our perspective. These are things that come from influencers. We've had over 80 influencers around the world participate in this report. So if you download it, you'll see a lot of quotes from them as well. And then what we did is then we also brought Khoros into developing this report. So now with each trend, you won't just see an insight, you'll actually see how you should be engaging in the marketplace. And that combination is something really unique and I think provides a lot more value to you all when you download the report. So what we're going to cover today, though, is while there's 10 trends that we do cover in the report, as I said Dan earlier, I meant Stuart, I apologize. What Stuart mentioned earlier is you can download the report. I believe it's in one of the tools you have. You can just use the QR code on the screen as well. But we do have 10 trends that are in there with, again, insights to actions. Today, we're going to focus on 3 of them. One is the customer experience. We'll get even more social. We're going to get into that. Personas are over, right? You'll think communities, and that's a big shift. Personas are certainly something I've been using, for the past 25 years or more. And social commerce will rise and fall. So those are the 3 trends that we're going to cover. These aren't in order of importance. They're just 3 that we believe rose to the top that we wanted to talk about and felt like it can glean the most value. So getting into the first trend, customer experience gets even more social. So diving into this, customer experience is not just about customer service anymore. I think as you'll see, or as you'll probably experience, customer service used to just be about one department, but customer experience is really about a journey. And but what we're seeing now is 95% of all decisions, purchase decisions, are being influenced by online conversations. And that's been driven by reviews, right? We know that's probably one of the #1 things that really determine it. And the number of channels, though, that consumers have access to has gotten broad, to say the least, right? And so now companies need to think about not only all these new channels in which to interact with consumers around, but they now need to look at customer service and customer experience in a new way. And some companies are starting to break down those barriers of customer service being a silo, right, or one part of an organization, to looking at how do they integrate customer service, customer success teams, social media, and even sales teams, right? Because now this urgency of this demanding consumer, you need to address them in all of these various channels. And it certainly is a lot to take on. And Natanya, I mean, this really lends itself to Khoros' expertise. If maybe you can talk a little bit about how brands are to engage and keep up with all these channel choices to deliver a customer experience in social environments.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, David. You know, I think you hit on this real word for consideration, which is urgency. We have this other statistic that tells us that 75% of consumers say the pandemic has driven long-term changes in their behaviors and preferences. And so I think one of the first things at this umbrella level is for us to remember that there's no going back. We are where we are today. And I remember early days of the pandemic, I would muse on calls. I wonder how much of this is going to stick. And a lot of it stuck. And so I think a critical piece for our brands and all of those out there who are trying to create great customer experiences is to understand that this sense of urgency and the expectation is here to stay. And so what this means is there's a real need, not just an opportunity, but a real need to prioritize customer experience and move at a very rapid pace. You know, in some cases, some parts of the business can't keep up with others. We know for those of us who have spent time in retail and other areas like that, supply chains may be a little bit slower. So how do we compensate for that? By engaging in the places where we can go more quickly, connecting with customers in brand love, which is one of the things that our customer at Target does, but also customer support, right? How are we responding quickly to customer issues and really keeping the energy around the brand? And I think the other thing too that we knew to be true but continues to really show itself is we have to meet customers in their channel choice. For a lot of years, I think we thought about how do we try to bring people back to our channel of choice as a brand, but customers want us to meet them where they are. And what that really means is we need strategies, we need teams, and we need tools that allow us to bring all of those channels together and then work with a customer. And instead of asking them to come to us, we go to them. And so I think the last thing for us is how are we testing and learning? You know, one of the things that you said, David, is we are, all of this is here to stay with this urgency. And we're not going to talk about all of the changes, but we need to acknowledge the changes and build in an ongoing cadence of test and learning, which means you have to have access to really great data that you can trust. And you have to have a method and a methodology for understanding that data and reviewing it regularly. So I think that that's one of our last pieces is never stop testing and never stop learning. And so I'm really curious, Dan, what are some of the things that are happening at Kraft Heinz? You're a leader in this area around customer experience through listening and engagement.
Yes, hi. Thank you again for having me. Just touch on a couple of points that both David and Natanya just mentioned. David was talking about the need to invest in customer service. I couldn't agree more. I spent over 10 years in customer service here at Kraft Heinz, and it's an exciting time because, as Natanya said, consumers expect you to be available on the channel that they want to engage with you. And so we've made some sizable investments in our customer service team to ensure that we continue to listen to our consumers and provide that support and meet them where they are. From a innovation standpoint, I'm sorry, David, I can't see the slides. Are we on the innovation slide?
Yep, we're on slide 7, Dan.
Okay, wonderful. So my apologies. Yeah, so with innovation and social listening, we leverage social listening across Kraft Heinz pretty heavily for innovation, ideas, opportunities, such as flavor extensions, new packaging. But, traditionally, our social listening was around understanding brand health. What are people saying? Is it positive? Is it negative? Who are the influencers driving those conversations? So we can really better understand how consumers are perceiving our brands. It helps us identify opportunities, and it helps us, maybe even change course in determining what our strategies should be. But at times that social data can get really, really large and clouded. And sometimes it's hard to get to that level of actionable insights. So what I mean by that, for example, there may be engagement mentions of your brand that aren't necessarily specific to your brand. Now, we at Kraft Heinz have some iconic brands like Jell-O and Kool-Aid. So you can imagine there's a lot of tweets out there where people talking about my arms feel like Jell-O, or, stop drinking the Kool-Aid. So with social, we gather all those insights, but we have to be very careful about, are we really listening to the consumer talking about our brand? And as we get into the online review space, this is what I love about this space, is that nearly all of those comments that consumers are leaving on Target.com, on Walmart.com, Amazon, nearly 100% of those are actionable, and they're about the product and they're about the brand. So we made some investments to bring that information into TalkWalker. So we're bringing in the ratings, all of that unstructured review comments. That allows us to rack them up and see across those different retailers to better understand emerging themes, what are consumer satisfiers, dissatisfiers. And it's really valuable in terms of, this is a relatively new channel for food and beverage, right? Shipping product traditionally to a retailer is very different now that it's coming to a distribution center and then to your home. And then, last thing here I'd say is that the ratings and reviews are, incredibly valuable. David said it a little while ago. More than 95% of our decisions to buy are influenced by those reviews. And they're an incredible source, even from like an innovation standpoint. I touched on, we can get immediate feedback, but if we're listening online to those online reviews, we can listen at a category level too. So maybe we want to understand what consumers are saying about, convenience brands, or maybe we want to better understand the sauces category. So we can, open up that search and scan across categories, not just our own brands, to glean those insights as well. So with that said, we're placing a significant emphasis on paying attention to what consumers are saying, monitoring them, measuring them, but equally as important, we're responding to those consumers. We're engaging with those consumers and creating that one-to-one connection.
It's really incredible. And Dan, what I love about what you all are doing, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, Kraft Heinz is not only, Dan is a big champion of ours because they are a customer of ours as well as Khoros.
Yep.
And they, we listen to our customers too. They often define a lot of what we're creating from our platform to meet the needs of our customer. But it's really incredible to see, right, over a short amount of time, how social conversations, I think, are the new kind of driver, how they can even, lead to actions like product innovation, which is pretty incredible, right? That it's more than insights, it's the action that you take. So that is fantastic. The next trend that we want to talk about, if I can just move forward here, is the idea that personas are over. You will think communities. And boy, I don't know about you, Dan and Natanya, but I've been working with personas since, I believe, the early 90s when I was working in the agency world, and really crafting those personas. And everybody, on this webinar right now probably doesn't need a lesson on what they are, but obviously they're fictional characters to, represent different use types, right? Needs, behaviors, or goals of a customer. But what's really interesting in the shift that we're seeing in terms of communities is that nailing down a persona has become increasingly difficult, right? Consumer types are shifting so quickly. And so we're going to see brands shifting from just persona-based to understanding brand communities and getting involved in those conversations. Obviously, influencers have had a lot to do with this because of their role around common passions and interests. One of the examples that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is actually StockX, right? And for those of you who don't know, it's an online marketplace that's a reseller primarily of sneakers. But if I asked you about a persona, or if I was working at an agency or at a brand, figuring out what is the persona. Well, it could be young males from the Midwest, or you might say it's a teenage girl from the city, or it could be a suburban father, right? And all of those personas, I guess, could share a common interest and participate in conversations. And that's what we mean by shifting from personas to communities. It's about like-minded thinking and like-minded experiences, regardless of some of the attributes that might go along with a persona. The rise of Discord is another example of that. I was pretty surprised to find out that almost 10% right now of people in the US have used Discord to have conversations because they find that it's a place of belonging and a place for interaction and conversation. And again, we go back to, they're not looking for a persona type. They're looking for a community where they can share, share and reflect on different passions and areas. And those for me are a pretty massive shift from brands and marketing. I think that's going to be one of the big challenges, not only from developing those insights. I think it's almost easier to find some of the insights around the communities, but engaging with those communities takes on a different form. And Natanya, that's certainly an area that you know best.
Absolutely. I think that social has always been about community building, even from the very beginning. It really depends on where you are to how you show up, because as a brand, you want to really be part of the conversation and understand how people want to speak. What's happening on Discord is different than what's happening on Reddit, is different than what's happening on Facebook. And I think years ago, we believed that we could show up in a single way across all of those communities. But what we have to do is start to understand the community and the people that are there, what the ethos of that community is, and then how to fit your brand into it. But the other opportunity that I think we are seeing as communities start to be this focus is, when would a brand choose to own a community? These are all earned communities where you go out into the conversation. But we actually have several customers support where they've actually brought the community to them. They have a very rich engagement with their employees. And what we're seeing is, it's not an either or. You don't have to walk away from Facebook or Discord in order to have your own community. But when you are a brand and you get to have the owned community, you can think about what conversations you want to host, what experiences you want to create that are deeply integrated in your ecosystem. And the other thing that's really great is you get to understand your customer at a level because of all the data that the conversation creates that I think further contributes. So one of the things I'm excited about is encouraging brands to consider both owned and earned community together in a more holistic branded community strategy.
And I'm sure one of the challenges in Tanya is, right, when you have an owned community, is still letting the voice of the consumers come through versus driving those conversations in your community.
Mm-hmm. It is. And, we have an entire community strategy practice. And one of the things that we work with our customers on is, how do you let the community have its voice? Some of that is very tactical around what are the standards of the community and setting those from the very beginning. But what we found is, on a branded community, most people are well-intentioned. And if you set up a structure, you establish, work with diligent but not overly heavy moderation, the community will tell you what it needs, right? It's definitely, I think about it as like tending my wildflower garden, right? And so we have to create a little bit of space there. But if you're really clear and have a solid reason for wanting to engage in your community that really is about truly engaging with your consumers, and you keep that front of mind as the direction for the community versus trying to sell them something or otherwise force a solution, you find that the community really will grow and flourish. And we've seen that across every possible community, from consumer communities to B2B communities. I think because it's in the branded space, you can also do other cool things like bring in your learning management system or bring in your shopping experience and really create a holistic approach to that conversation with the consumer.
Well, as we both know, Kraft Heinz is certainly kind of a leader in this area, thinking about their view of communities is about shared consumer experiences. And Dan, I know you have an example of how you all look at that and how you treat communities and engage with communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to build on what Natanya said in that conversation, I think about some of our brands really reaching out to more specific communities. For example, gamers. right? We've got some brands that really resonate well within that community. So, ensuring that, we're doing some work on Discord this year, we're doing some work on Twitch, partnering with influencers within those communities. So, that's more of, kind of a in the moment type strategy. So if we take a step back though, and we think about communities and trends from a longer growth strategy, what we're focusing on now in terms of overlong trends is, it's being on top of food trends for us is a given, right? We want to be able to listen for popular new emerging food trends, right? Things like, even from more of an R&D perspective. So the rise in popularity of let's say, monk fruit as a sweetener, moving away from artificial sweeteners, or what are new appliance trends that our culinary team can learn from. But when we think about trends too, the larger trends, they often start outside our categories. And then they flow down, and what you see here, they're flowing down from culture through consumer experiences, and then ultimately into our home. So that's how we're looking at, the larger trendscape. And we're taking this consumer-centric approach to really understanding what those cultural trends are and understanding how we're going to be able to see the change that's coming. So while yes, it's very important to understand your category and your food trends for us, it's equally important for us to look further up that funnel, outside of our categories, to pick up on those signals and understand what else might impact us. It doesn't have to start with food, right? But we know that oftentimes those trends are lived experiences, and consumers are back out of the homes. We're traveling more, we're going out to eat. And then that comes back to the kitchen. So it's not a set formula, right? But it's a general flow of how trends originate in culture and come down into the food-related categories. So I do have an example here. And, we are listening at across a lot of these different types of macro trends. So it's not just what you saw in that box before, but it's understanding, what's happening in the world today, right? So we've got aging population that we need to pay attention to. We've got, environmental expectations and causes and commitments that we need to continue to listen to and understand and pick up on those early signals. But what I love about this example here is this is an example of a cultural phenomenon in driving food. I've learned a lot about this group as we dove into this, but you think about the BTS culture, right? They're incredibly popular. They have over 68 million followers on Instagram. Took a look at that last night. And they're a tremendous contributor to the economy in South Korea. But if we think about that BTS culture, they have communities. That is a community in itself, but they have sub-communities. They have these armies. There's probably a lot of folks on here that are in some of those BTS armies, because there are thousands of those BTS army communities out there. And when we think, so what does that mean? That's 68 million people influenced by this band and their love of their culture. And they're very proud of their culture. You look at their posts, they're always sharing fashion, technology, entertainment, and of course, food. So people want to experience the culture. So I just read last night that says somewhere around 1 in 10 tourists who visit South Korea go there because of their affinity with BTS. So they travel to Korea. They have that authentic experience. They go to their concerts. And they draw consumers, or I guess fans, from all over the world. Now, so this is just an example of, again, from the top, you dive into that culture, you experience it. When BTS had shows, and the Korean food category is growing very, very fast. We see menu adoption of Korean food growing very, very quickly, especially like Korean barbecue, we've all seen has become very popular over the years. But when BTS played at one of their first concerts after the pandemic, wait times at some of the local Korean restaurants were over 5 hours. People want to experience their culture. And then when they make that investment, they want to be able to recreate that investment at home. So this is just an example. I mean, it's a fun example, but it's just an example of culture influencing our experiences, and with travel and experiences with new cultures and new cuisines, right? We see that trend coming into our homes.
It's interesting, Dan, because that this is not necessarily my personal choice in terms of music genre, but even that cultural impact has impacted us. Where I've actually tried doing some Korean meals that I've made for my kids at home, and I'm sure, while I didn't directly attribute it to BTS, I'm sure that's where a lot of that trend started and communities started building around it.
Yeah, so it's a really good example of there's a community, an identity, a group of fans. And then they get so invested in that community that, entertainment is over here and food's over here. And right, it coming to the home and coming into the kitchen is what we're looking for.
Well, it's actually a good segue to the last trend when we talk about moving into the home, right? One of the last trends, or the third trend that we have to share with you today, is the idea that social commerce will rise and fall. Right? It's a pretty impactful statement, but it's really still the Wild West. There's no denying the impact of social commerce. Right now, statistics that we've seen is over 50% of people in the United States have made a purchase via social. And and the amount of purchases through social environments is expected to grow by 30% next year. So without a question, that will be a driver. However, some of the things that we're learning and that we're hearing about from consumers is that they're not just doing it because of convenience. Yes, we know consumers are spending a lot of time on social platforms, but it's actually about the relevant experiences that they're having in social environments. And those relevant experiences lead to more spontaneous and discovery or spontaneous purchases or discovery. I mean, in many ways, they look at social media and people that they interact with as a trusted advisor. And that's really influenced a lot of social commerce. We talked earlier about reviews, which is one aspect of it. We talked about influencers, which is another aspect, and then obviously communities. But nobody has really figured it out. It really is the Wild West. It's shocking to me to think about the fact that TikTok only last year launched shopping on their platform, all right, less than a year ago. That's really mind-boggling, considering I feel like I don't go a day without hearing about TikTok. But then you have a lot of, some of the bigger established players like Facebook and Instagram. They've been trying to figure it out. One of the things that they launched in the Asia market, which worked really well, is live shopping, right? It's almost like the QVC for social. And it worked really well in Asia. Now they launched it in the United States, didn't work out as well. And now there's been discussions of them either sunsetting it or moving away from live shopping. Whereas YouTube has tried shoppable videos. They've tried personalized experiences. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in the metaverse, right? And how shopping takes place there. And so while the race is definitely on, there's certainly not going to be one solution. This is going to be a combination to different people, different purchase behaviors, different platforms that we talked about, and different ways to engage. So I don't envy a lot of marketers because of the speed and complexity and options that consumers have. But when we talk about being a consumer-first company or brand, this is what we're talking about. It's focusing the attention, the capabilities, the resources to stay involved in it, really understand it, listening deeper to your customers so that you can better, right, translate that into improved experiences, brand connections, and revenue. Natanya, I know you have, because we've spoken about this at length, and I know all of Khoros' customers, and you can't always mention them, but you have a tremendous amount of experience in this area as well, since this is about the engagement part. And I'm interested to just better understand how you support or guide your customers.
Absolutely. And I can't wait till the day that we can share some of the excellent work that our customers are doing. What's really interesting for me is even though social commerce, it seems like it is this new frontier, so many of the foundational 101 rules of social still apply. So I think one of them is, and this is the thing that a lot of us who were early social practitioners got into the business for, which is there is an opportunity to be bold and to test and to learn. There's a nimbleness that happens in social. Be curious about, we know that social is established as a demand generation tool. We know that it's established as an influence, a place for influencers and a place to really drive preference. So go one step further. How far are people willing to go? Well, they shop. What social platforms? Test it. See what's going to happen. There's an amazing amount of tolerance in social. You may find that people are willing to go 95% of the way in the purchase, and they need to take the last 5% onto your owned channels for the transaction. Maybe they're willing to buy something in line. Some things, particularly consumer brands, feel really easy. Like, can I buy that really cool dress that I saw from White House Black Market? Or, if we think about, like, I clearly am revealing my own holiday shopping trend. But is somebody actually willing to buy an increased service package, right, from a B2B partner? And I think the only way that you know is by trying. So that then comes back to a second piece, which is always be gathering data and always be evaluating so that you can understand what's working and what's not. So ensuring that you have the data to evaluate your engagement and also to listen to the conversation that's happening about that engagement. And so I think the last thing we would offer is, what are the lessons that we can learn from social care? So we wrap this all back up from where we started at the beginning. People, consumers of all kinds, B2B, B2C, are expecting us to meet them where they are. So why not that also being true about commerce, right? Why are we trying to pull people into our own experiences if we can create a pretty reasonable, I feel like not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good is the place to start here. But how do we meet people in the place where they want to engage and offer them the opportunity to transact with us? Why should transactions be any different than customer success? Now, people may think that they want to transact there and then change their minds later, but I really do think there's this opportunity to be bold, to utilize data to test and learn, and to really, again, meet people where they are and understand what kind of engagements they want to have with us in those spaces.
That's great, and this might be a great topic for another webinar in the future. If we can spend more time and actually get some of our great shared customers to want to be mentioned, people like Kraft, that could be something to really get into, from insights to how we deal with social commerce and engagement. So hopefully more on that at another time, and obviously in the report, you can get more information on these. And before we finish, I just want to very quickly, first of all, apologize to Stuart, because when we started out, I referred to you as Dan, which is not to be confused with Dan from Kraft. So, and I just wanted to thank you, Natanya and Dan, again for participating. I think we actually finished on time to leave enough time for Q&A, which doesn't often happen. But I'd love to just finish with just a quick thought from my perspective. Dan and Natanya, I don't know if you want to have a quick kind of closing thought, but we all know it's a customer first world. And I know this is going to be harder to execute than it is to say, but I do believe that brand winners will be those who not only can listen deeper, right, really understand the voice of the consumer, but now those brands who can improve their ability or agility, right, to get from insight to engagement. It is a little bit of selfish promotion in terms of that's what we do, right? That's what Talkwalker does, but it really is a critical aspect of every brand, in terms of them working with customers going forward. So I'm sort of fortunate to work at a company like this. But, listen hard, act quick, and be agile would be the recommendations I'd make going forward.
I think about all of these conversations, and I'll go back to something that I said. We have foundations of how to engage with people in social media, and we've been doing this for a while now, right? And so I think that as we consider all of the changes that are happening in the world of social, all the opportunities that are created, we really want to remember what has worked for us from a practice standpoint, even as we try new things. And so I continue to believe in being curious, in testing and learning, and being incredibly rooted in data that's not just about the transaction, but in generating true value and outcomes for your customer base. And so I think that we keep doing what we've been doing this whole time, and considering how that's opens us up in new frontiers to really have good advancement in the opportunities that we bring for our brands.
Excellent. Do we want to bring Stuart back in for a little Q&A time?
I think you do, and hopefully I'm back here up on screen, and I am. Yeah, thank you, David. I would call myself Dan as well. So because we're all used to this. No problem with that. Listen, great presentation, really great report. I know it's out there. I was actually looking at it before our session today, and just for everyone in the audience, it's a rather complete study. It's about 100 pages. So as I'm doing that, thank you. Actually, I was about to say I can move to the one with the QR code, but I'm going to help us all out because we were getting some people who were not quite QR code friendly. So what I'm just going to do is quickly post this message with a direct link to it, so you all should have access to that before we get into Q&A. So again, for those in the audience, you're going to see a bit.ly there that you can also use to get to the report. We'll also share this bit.ly in the follow-up email that we send out. Before we get to Q&A, I just want to take a brief moment here and just, again, let me leave this up while I'm talking. Just to remind our audience, first up, if you've got a question, just use the question tool that you should see there on your screen. Submit your question. We're going to get to as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. If we don't get to your question, please know I always forward them over to our sponsors, so there's the opportunity for an offline response. Today's webinar has been recorded. You're going to get a link to that recording this afternoon, so check your email, 3:30, 4 o'clock. Grab that link. Feel free to share it with your colleagues if you think that they're going to be interested in any of this. So again, check your email for that. We talked again, if you want the slides, you're also going to find them right now in event resources. You should see that tab on your screen. So I want to get to some questions. And so for this first question, I'm going to jump to the slide here, David, that you showed with the full top 10 social media trends. And obviously we got to 30% of them, and we don't have a 3-part webinar to get to all 10 of them. But I would just love to go around sort of round robin the three of you just pretty quickly of the other 7 that we didn't have a chance to get to. What do you really sort of think is sort of the most significant, or something that you would really want to sort of eye on here? So David, let me start with you, and then I'll go around to the other panelists.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these have a common theme, right? And while Talkwalker focuses on social listening, it's also a voice of the consumer, because we are looking at conversations beyond just social platforms. But when we see the things like the decentralization of social networks, when you look at multi-sensory experiences are going to change, and the environment's no longer an afterthought. What we're seeing in totality is the real impact that social and conversations in general have on business, right? In totality, they're no longer about, let's just follow what's being said about us, or let's keep tabs on what's happening. There's now tangible business impact that's being driven from conversations online, whether we like it or not. It's influenced everything from purchase decisions to even, much broader global issues, like what companies should be participating in countries that might have a lot of negative conversations going on, right? And I'm not being specific because I don't want to call out any one country or brand, but what we're really seeing is the elevation of online conversations and the importance that it needs to play in a company's role. And the challenging part with it is it's not just the responsibility of one department. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that companies are going to have to deal with, right? It's not just research or insights or engagement or social or brand. It's how do all of those come together to understand what's happening and address that, right, from insights to action.
Yeah. Natanya, are any of these 4 through 10 that sort of stand out to you?
No one's going to be surprised when I want to talk about data again. So 7 and 9, predictive analytics and the cookie finally gets dunked. I think that as much as I said, stay in your foundations and use data, I think the data that we have available to us and the way that we will be able to use it, and in some cases no longer use it, is really going to change. So I think that as social marketers, we're going to have to elevate our game. We're going to have to work cross-functionally with our business analysis partners to really dig into a new nuanced level of marketing data. And it's no longer about last click attribution or any of those things, right? Like we have to really look at the broad data sets available to us and start to think about how we measure and inform social in new ways. So I think that those are the things that are really exciting, but also take a new level of expertise and support from other areas of the business.
Yeah, and Dan, from the brand side, which of these trends just sort of like do you think is like not only appropriate to what you're doing at Kraft Heinz, but if you were talking to other brand, people who do what you do, that you would say that, make sure you pay attention to this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there are some certain macro trends out in the world that we definitely want to pay attention to. I touched on a couple earlier, from, ESG initiatives, right? Planet friendly, doing our part, good stewards of the environment, right? You think about communities within that. You think about just, not necessarily communities, but the Gen Z, right? They have very high expectations. They expect that brands are listening. And so we really need to, continue to listen to those larger macro trends so we can stay on top of what the expectations are from the consumers, right? So I talked a little bit about environmental, but there's other ones. We think about our population. Our population is changing. Our consumers are getting older, right? The older population is growing at a faster rate. So right there for a food company, you start to think about what are their needs going to be, right? So maybe that's functional foods that are, and maybe what type of healthcare will they be receiving in the future? And that all comes back to, are we prepared to meet their needs and their demands in the future? So where do you find these trends? There's not one answer to that, but, we partner with, we can look at what is trending on Google. What are some like near-term Google trends? But, again, I think there's not one answer to what trends should we be focusing on, but it's that ability to step back and understand who your consumer is and what are those trends that you're going to need to pay attention to that are going to come to you soon.
Got it. I just took the slides down because we just want to have the conversation as we go through some of this. One of the questions is and it came in from a whole bunch of people. And I think we were even prepared for this question coming in. So Natanya, I'm going to send this one to you. But, as we talk about communities, right, obviously the focus, we were talking a lot of business to consumer. And I think the example that Dan shared about K-pop, however much we sound like the parents of someone who listens to K-pop as we talk about it, but understanding again the power of the BTS army, the power of Swifties, the power of the Beehive, right? If we're just going to stay in three music artists. But I mean, we can go into all the others where there are all these. Again, communities are not always just millions and millions strong, but are there. So on a B2B level, how do they tap in, right, into a community sense as we do that? So I'd love to hear from you. I know you've got a POV on this.
I love this topic, and I'm so glad so many people asked about communities. I started my technical career in communities almost 20 years ago, and so I'm so excited to see them have this sort of return to usefulness and popularity. But here's the thing about B2B. They're enthusiasts about B2B as well, right? They are enthusiasts about their day job, we see this a lot, particularly in technology, right? So Alteryx is one of our B2B customers, and they have this thriving community, right? And that's an owned community, but you can also go out and see where the enthusiasts who are your customers are engaging. And so we'll see it in places like Discord, we'll see it in places like Reddit. And so the way that I like to think about it is, imagine if you could bring your key customers who are most enthusiastic about their jobs, about their careers, and put them all in a room and listen to them talk, right? What would they be talking about, and what's the energy they would generate? And that's the place that you can start to think about either a community you should go looking for, or quite frankly, a community that you might choose to build. And I think this is a great place where you start to think about something like a deep listening solution, because you may have to do a little bit of looking to see where they're gathering. But really, a community is just a digital version of the conversations people would be having in person if we could put them together in person in rooms all day, every day. So we've seen real success. And what we see about that in particular is people like to help each other out. The real power of community, connecting and being of service and showing their expertise. And so when you think about this in a B2B space, what are those connections and those expertise, the lines between them? And those are the places where your community can start. And it also creates a great opportunity for, quite frankly, self-service in support. So if people are trying to get support with a product, or they're trying to get support with a concept in their jobs, the community will rally together to offer best practices. Microsoft has had this going on for years and years and years, right? The Microsoft community is incredibly powerful. So I think it's about knowing your customers and your users, if you're a technology company, figuring out what they're passionate about, and either seeing where they're already being passionate, or seeing if you have an opportunity to create that passion space for them to be better at their jobs and what they love as a career.
And so this is, I mean, as you were bringing this up, it was interesting because you named all of these community platforms, but not what one would think of as the largest in there. Well, you mentioned the parent company, but LinkedIn is not even mentioned within that. But you're really talking about places that people go where there's a commonality, and whether that commonality is, I'm hearing you say, that might be we're all outdoor enthusiasts, or it might be we all work for companies that serve outdoor enthusiasts. And so we want to know about what's going on there. And so as that goes through. Excellent. I'm going to sort of go through, I want to have like one more question. I don't know which one to grab out of all this. So I'm actually going to go as just extending that, because, in this discussion, we talked about social, and there were a lot of sources, as we talked about social listening, that we don't often hear on these conversations, right? We were talking about, and I wrote these out, right? We were talking about Discord. We were talking about Twitch. We were talking about product review sites. We were talking a lot about that. And so I'm going to start with you, Dan, on this one. Are there any, Reddit was just even brought up, any group, as people are thinking both in terms of from their brands as social media managers, where do I need to be? And then the other side, which is as social listening and analytics managers, what do I need to tune into? Is there like one channel that you think is critical that maybe people aren't thinking about today?
Yeah, I think that answer to me depends on which brands we're talking about. We have some really great brands that have super high engagement, strong engagement in baking, and take for example Philadelphia cream cheese, right? Tremendous amount of conversations and passion on YouTube. People sharing cheesecake recipes, people just making recipes using our products. So for many of our brands that are more of recipe brands, we're going to focus on YouTube quite a bit because there's just so much content there. For some brands that skew younger, yeah, you're right. That's like these new channels that are coming up, Discord and Twitch, TikTok. It's a challenge, right? TikTok's a bit of a challenge, but still important to get your ear to the ground in TikTok and understand what consumers are saying about your categories, about your brands. So I think Twitter is tremendous value, obviously, because a lot of what happens on some of those other platforms where we may have less access to eventually make their way to Twitter. So I think Twitter's a kind of that catch-all where a lot of them have funneled down to. But it's
I want to hear from Natanya and David on this one, but I'm also going to limit you to like a 15-second response because we're running out of time. So Natanya, a channel that people aren't thinking about that you would suggest that they'd think about over the next 12 months.
What I will offer is I feel that everyone is thinking about TikTok, but I think that we have to really think about TikTok as the new frontier, like we thought about Twitter 15 years ago. TikTok is not going away. So then the question becomes, how do we show up in a manner on TikTok that's aligned with what TikTok users are expecting?
Got it. And David, 15 seconds or less?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see how the metaverse plays out, right? Is it something that is going to have significant impact over the next 12 months, or is it something that's really more future driven? And that's, it's still to be decided, but I'm very curious to find out.
David, Natanya, and Dan, I want to thank the three of you. Just a great presentation. Really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to part 2 because we got to keep going. There's so much going on, and we are in such a transitional period of what is an increasingly mature social media market is totally changing. So love where we're going and this conversation. I just want to provide some quick reminders to our audience again. If you want the slides, you're going to find them in event resources, and in there you'll see the QR code that you should be able to use to get directly over to the report. We'll also share a link in the follow-up email that we send later today. That's also going to have a link to the on-demand version, so look for it about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Share that link, do all that. Lastly, adweek.com/webinars, our webinar calendar. See what's coming up. If you enjoyed today's, sign up for an upcoming webinar. Lots of great topics. Adweek.com/webinars. So again, let me thank our sponsors from TalkWalker. Let me thank our speakers today. Want to thank our audience for taking time out of your busy day, and we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Right. Thank you.